Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast, where we talk about real Canadian rugby. I'm Stu Hardy, joined as always by Derek Brissett, and for this very special episode, we are joined by a Olympic medal-winning coach. He is the now former women's national sevens team head coach and the future Ottawa Gee Gees women's head coach, Jack Hanratty. Jack, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. Much appreciated. So whenever we do one of these interview episodes, we always start with the same question. And, we have had a lot of Canadians on that grew up in Canada. But Jack, obviously, you were born and raised in Ireland. So what got you started in rugby to begin with?
And I've heard a few of those stories, and I think a lot of them are quite similar. Mine is family. I grew up in a small seaside town called Skerries. My uncle was playing for Ireland in the 80s, and we had a real family connection. My grandfather would have been president of the local rugby club. My cousin went on to be captain of the local rugby club. My brother is the manager of the first team there for the local rugby club. We kind of grew up there, training, playing mini rugby, going on to youth rugby. Our public school was up the road in terms of high school. So I went to Skerries Community College, played there, but we played all our home games in our local rugby club, and that was kind of the start of it. From in my end, I was keen to be in the rugby club for every minute of every day. Over the weekend, you got your can of Coke and your packet of Tato crisps, and you worked in the sweet shop. You would put up the jerseys or record the video for the first team. You kind of did whatever you could just to kind of feel a part of it. And looking back on it now, it's probably one of the best upbringings I could have had in terms of giving me kind of a bit of a rugby philosophy and hopefully consistent themes throughout rugby in my life.
Yeah, so like you said, a lot of people do mention family, so that kind of does lead into like our next question, which is all generally like who is like, somebody that was like personally influential on you getting into rugby. You kind of already like mentioned like that your uncle like played for Ireland and like obviously, growing up with such close ties to your local rugby club and stuff. But is there? Do you just when you think about how you got into rugby and stuff, is it mostly just family members, or is it like is there anybody else that you think kind of helped you really, along the way in your rugby journey?
Yeah, I could go on for a while. Like my uncle was someone I really looked up to, and so did everybody else in the town. There's not that many international rugby clubs come from my local rugby club at the moment. Hugo Lennox, who plays for the Ireland Sevens team, had been on the series, and I got to be on the series with him, which was really special. Kieran Frawley, who hit that amazing drop goal against South Africa for Ireland this summer. Again, he's in the squad for Ireland at the moment. So that's been a real success. Has been the summer activities for Skerries Rugby Club, but back in the day when my uncle was playing, he also then went on to coach. He was a coach of Leinster. He was a manager with Leinster and a manager with the Ireland under-20s team. So I kind of got to jump in the back seat of the car with my cousin to go to a lot of early events when Leinster weren't really that famous or that big. When you had 500 people in Donnybrook on a cold Friday night. I remember being at a game where they got some big victories, but I also remember like being with the man and his dog watching Leinster when it was professional, but it was still trying to work its way out. In terms of my town, like so, Jim would have given me that, and he certainly gave me the quote of there'll be 15 players that think you're cool. There's going to be 7 or 8 that think you're only okay, and the rest of the squad don't like you at all. So I thought that was the good quote. So for me, I've kept that where I was said, yeah, there's 7 people that think you're okay. There's 5 that think you're, maybe below okay, and the rest don't like you at all. And he certainly did help me in terms of, even from a coaching perspective, that you're not in this to be liked. Like and it was probably one of my weaknesses, coaching. I always wanted to be liked, so he kind of tried to help me keep my feet on the ground and give me that. In terms of my town as well, Paddy Connolly and Aidan Sherlock were two influential guys that coached me and gave me an opportunity to coach. And I was always just willing to help. And in my mind, a lot of people opened the door to go in, and I learned so much from them. And unfortunately, Aidan Sherlock was passed away last year. But when I got back to my hometown in Skerries this summer, straight after Paris, Paddy Connolly was one of the first people that I asked to go for a coffee with, to essentially say thanks. And that was a pretty special moment, and I got to thank my uncle as well in person. But to be honest, my family have been so supportive, and I kind of, when I told them I was leaving this gig, I had to be really cautious about how to tell everybody, because they were everywhere: Dubai, Hong Kong, Madrid, France. I nearly had a family member at every stop on the series, and they were always wearing red. So I've a lot to be very thankful of, and even Skerries Rugby Club put out a good luck poster. Now, they found the ugliest photo of me on the internet, but a good luck poster for Hugo, who was competing for Ireland at the Olympics, and for myself in Canada. So I could certainly feel the support from the very beginning to right
now. Is your family more upset about the fact that they don't get to travel all around the world now, and will now be like, if they want to see you, they have to go to Ottawa? Is that that sounds like I'm like bashing Ottawa, which I'm not really trying to do here, but
I to be fair, Derek, I think you can bash Ottawa in the winter. I don't think my father, who to be honest was traveling for the weather more than the rugby, I think.
Yeah.
Like, from their perspective, they were pretty happy that my parents, direct parents, were pretty happy that I was giving up the job, to be honest. My other extended family, my brother and my cousins who would travel to watch the team all the time, were definitely supportive of the decision. But I think they really enjoyed living through it. My father, who's not really a sporty guy, he would kind of define, what does Jack do for a living? He essentially does what Ted Lasso does, or tries to do it, and that's kind of the summary. So they got to live kind of through that, and they also got to see how much I was thankful of my love of Canada. I've got the passport, and whenever we didn't get to sing the anthem that frequently on the 7 series when I was in charge, but when we did hear it, it wasn't just a job for me. It was really special for my adopted nation, for sure.
All right. Well, before we get into your coaching history, there's one question we always ask, and is there a player, whether 15s or 7s or both, whichever you prefer, that whenever they step or stepped onto the pitch, you would always love watching them play?
Can I throw a few names?
Yeah, go ahead.
As many as
that's a cop out. From an Irish perspective, I love watching Brian O'Driscoll. He's the first name that came to mind all the time. Now, with this new generation and these new level of players, I find it curious the way rugby people mightn't know who he is, because in my mind he was this superstar. And very funnily enough, at the exact same time, Lynn Cantwell was playing centre for Ireland from the women's side, and I just thought that the number 13 was locked in, both from an Irish men's team and an Irish women's team. I loved watching both of them play. In terms of Canada, I loved. I thought she was an amazing warrior for the team. To be able to jump between 15s and sevens is really special. And then, I loved how natural Julianne Zussman played the game as well. So a few names there, and I even threw in a forward, which I think is for me who maybe concentrates a lot on the backs side of the game. Delighted that, well, Kelly kind of always tried to play like a back anyway, so maybe I've given four backs or wannabe backs as well.
Oh, are the forwards the seven players that don't like you normally? Is that how that works?
Well, of course, in the sevens game, we're all hybrids, aren't we? And that meaning whoever's closest to the scrum, just get yourself in there and you should be fine.
Yeah, fair enough, fair enough.
All right. So interestingly, is that when we've spoken to um those involved in like the coaching setup, they normally had a playing career, got involved in coaching at some point, and then when their playing career has ended, they then move into coaching. But you're interesting, Jack, in that your first coaching role came straight after you finished high school. So what was the biggest learning curve for you when you first began coaching?
Yeah, that is a very polite way of saying you clearly weren't very good at playing. So thanks for buttering that up. I'll go straight for the jugular because I wasn't very good. I probably was when I moved to Canada. I probably played a bit better than I ever did in Ireland. But yeah, I was really lucky, and it came in a kind of default way. I went to interview for a university degree in rugby and business. And I use inverted commas because it was the first year of this program, and no one knew kind of what it would be like, and I didn't get it. And I thought I interviewed very well. I thought I had a good background. I thought I showed I'd done a lot of coaching of high school level and club level. So I was wondering why I didn't, and I really tried to get as much feedback as possible. And what was interesting was one of the panel basically said, like, listen, you were never going to get that if you weren't going to offer them anything as a player. So I was
Mm.
kind of like, okay, well, that's pretty inconvenient for me. But one of the panel who interviewed me for that university course asked me to interview for a job with Leinster Rugby, in which it was a community rugby officer. And so I'm now at a high school. I don't really know what I'm going to do. I thought I was pretty confident about getting that a place in that degree course. But suddenly I interviewed for Leinster and became one of the youngest employed guys there, and they took a risk on me, but I'm hoping that I came good in the end, and I've a lot to thank Leinster Rugby for, and taking that initial step is certainly one of.
All right. You did eventually get a coaching role. This was with Dublin City University. So, interestingly enough, that one of your first coaching gigs out once you finished high school was at the university level, and you'll be going into a coaching role at the university level in Canada. So when it comes to these kind of collegiate sports, how does collegiate rugby in Ireland compare to that in Canada that you've seen so far?
Yeah, so I got that job because I was working with Leinster. It became part of my remit, that a certain percentage of my job to coach both the men's and women's university sides, in DCU, Dublin City University. Very lucky there. Again, I was very young and made. I almost get embarrassed about who I was as a coach then, because you're so young, you're so fresh, and you make so many mistakes that you like kind of head in the hand type stuff.
Mm,
I think what people don't realize is that the women's university game in Canada is sought after all over the world. It's
mm,
you're fully
yeah.
varsity. you're bought in with all the universities. You get to utilize all the amazing facilities and personnel that are employed in those universities. DCU was fantastic. It was a sports university, but it was mainly GAA. It was mainly Gaelic football,
Okay.
and athletics that were the core sports. So we were kind of building something, and the main universities in Ireland are involved in the All Ireland Club League. So the most famous rugby clubs would play against the university. So the most famous university being Trinity College, UCD, University of Limerick, Queen's University, all of those would actually play in the All Ireland League. So they wouldn't be in a varsity league across. So that's kind of the difference. And the women's game, I think, I still like it. There's definitely been some steps forward since I left, but I still think it's probably an opportunity that they haven't fully taken up on yet. And again, it's one of those things that, from a women's perspective here, and obviously the men's university championship that just went on was a real thrilling week for everybody. So I think hopefully that will just continue to grow. But from a women's perspective, there is a lot of jealousy about the setup here in Canada.
Interesting to hear that. And as you mentioned, the role at DCU was related to your position with Leinster Rugby. You said you joined as a rugby development officer. You also became a community rugby officer there as well. So how did those roles specifically influence your coaching career, besides combining with the role at DCU?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think when you're 19 years of age and you walk into Leinster and you get, I ended up getting a car sponsored by Leinster, like a huge big bag of kit, and you get cleats bought for you once a year and runners bought for you once a year. You feel like you're unbelievable. Like, you feel like you've made it. Why would I ever leave this job? And there was some amazing perks, but my remit was Dublin City, and Dublin City would be known for soccer, be known for Gaelic football, hurling. Rugby wouldn't, like, I was in the community when rugby would have been seen as more of a private school sport in Dublin. So I wasn't brought up that way. I wasn't in a private school. I was rugby club based. So a lot of what I was doing was going into areas that weren't known for rugby, which I think helped prepare me to move to Canada, because you're not going in presuming everyone wants to be on your team. You have to go in and sell the sport. And I think that was a really good learning for me in terms of moving to Canada. The role itself was excellent. I was really challenged, like, from creating. There was some brilliant initiatives, like one we called, which was Tackle Education, which tried to get going into schools that had a bad attendance record to try and use sport to try and get the attendance rate up. So, like, these things were incredibly challenging, but they were fantastic initiatives. And we did it in conjunction with the city council as well. And all of these things certainly challenged me and got me to work in rugby every day. But I probably didn't. I had to do some of the other coaching outside, like Dublin City University and some of the clubs that I coached, to actually start creating my own coaching style and coaching philosophy. But I'd say probably the biggest takeaway I got in those jobs was, some of the activities we got to do, learning from Joe Schmidt, which was an incredible opportunity. Once a month we'd get together and learn from one of the professional coaches. But also it was teaching some of the World Rugby coaching courses, or the Irish Rugby coaching courses. Was a really, like, I was very young, so, like, not everyone when they were volunteering wanted to come in and listen to this young lad in a tracksuit. Like, you had to be pretty good at your craft, and back then I was particularly good at the craft. I think I was the right guy at the right time, which seems to be a theme throughout my career. But it was a really good way of me kind of learning while doing and learning on the go.
All right, all right. So you mentioned about how that helped you prepare to move to Canada in the first place. Um, and your first role when you were in Canada was the provincial coach for Rugby Nova Scotia. But how did that role come about, and how were you able to find out about this? Because obviously, coming from um, coaching in Dublin City and being with Leinster, one of the now iconic premier rugby destinations in Europe, to go across the Atlantic and coach in Nova Scotia.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it probably goes a little bit further back. Um, there was a friend of mine in Leinster that had spent a bit of time in Halifax, had helped with a bit of development on the grassroots, and he was asked to go back. He now had a family, so it wasn't or an older family, and it wasn't on the cards. So he said, "Listen, this would be a great opportunity for this young, energetic fella who was me." And I went out for a week originally, and then went out for a few months to actually just coach a club team. So I coached the Halifax Stars for a few months. Dr. John Gillis was very eager to get me over, and he was excellent bending the truth in just enough of a way to tell me that the facilities that we are going to get, we're going to try and run an academy, and this is a club side. And I didn't really, I just kind of was like, yeah, it sounds great. And I when I went over, I didn't realize that they didn't even have a home field, never mind a clubhouse. And in fairness to them, that's changed now. They do have a home field, and they've got a wonderful clubhouse in Halifax. I just didn't get to reap the rewards back then. So then I went back to Leinster because I took a leave of absence for a few months, and then I went back to Leinster, and a few months later, and when you because I got the leave of absence, I came back in, and I saw Joe Schmidt in the hallway, and he said, and I'd had his son on work experience the previous year, so
Okay.
it was quite interesting. And then Joe said, "How was Canada?" And I said, "Oh no, it was brilliant." And he said, "Okay, well, come in to me at 11, and I want you to tell me about your experience." And I was like, "Okay." And Joe is very process based, and he probably doesn't even remember who I am. But I went into the office, and I remember he said, "What did you leave behind you?" And I just remember, like, when you're brought in and not intimidating, it's like the principal's office, or it's like your boss or whatever, the heart's racing. And I just kind of remember that question staying with me throughout. It's like, what are we leaving behind? If it's a training session, if it's a coaching course, if it's a job. And he was so particular with it. And I remember that I gave an answer, but honestly, I don't know whether it was a strong answer, and it made me really think about what did I leave behind. And so when the job opened up as provincial coach in Rugby Nova Scotia, it was a big life decision. Do I leave Leinster for good, or do I go across? And I had another opportunity through. I was doing a bit of radio at the time, for a Dublin radio station. And I was almost thinking, do I go that route? And I remember my boss at the time, Declan Fassbender, who was a really good mentor for me during the early years, basically was like, listen, you got to decide what route you want to go here. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to take the risk and go to Canada. I hadn't really had that life experience. I hadn't gone to university. I hadn't gone traveling before. So I said, you know what, let's do it. Let's try and get over there. So um, I went over, and it was a pretty positive decision on my life for sure.
All right.
And
Glad to hear
I'm sure
that.
he remembers you, especially like it's really easy to jog the memory when you see a guy with a silver medal around his neck at the Olympics. I'm sure it jogged the memory a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hey, I
there's a
remember
few
that guy.
people. There's a few people. I remember a few congratulations posts on social media that my brother was sending me. One from like a local bar that I worked at when I was stacking shelves when I was 13. Congratulations to the former employee.
Oh,
one, yeah, like a couple of those things happened, but it was surreal, that's for sure.
All right, all right. Um, so taking on the role as the provincial coach, you were not just the coach of like one team, you were essentially the coach of like all teams of men's and women's 15s and sevens. Now, there's obviously the most noticeable difference in terms of player size and time played between 15s and sevens. But what are some of the more subtle things that indicate like your different coaching styles you have to do for those kind of things that, people don't usually think about?
Yeah, now I like had so many people that helped me in Nova Scotia. So I definitely had a helping hand in all teams, but that's because I was a fool and I just loved it. Like I just loved going to, if it was a Saturday or Sunday and there was rugby on in Nova Scotia, I wanted to be there. And I think some people forget that, like, I moved over for this job. So it's not as if I had other hobbies, or a lot of my friends were made through rugby. So like like it was my hobby and my career all at the same time. And we had some fabulous people, and the president of Rugby Nova Scotia for years was a guy called Gino Carew, who when we came in, the provincial teams just blew up because we rebranded, and we had a lot of good people there that we tried to change a lot of things, and it really worked. And now it's elevated again since I've left. It's elevated in a huge way. In terms of the, because I think there's two parts to the question. There's probably men's and women's, and then there's 15s and sevens. And in terms from my end, from a Nova Scotia standpoint, we didn't have that long to train together as a consistent team. So we just tried to be very skill or create a little bit of a blueprint or a style of play for, and we tried to push that with men's and women's, and allowed people to kind of develop it. In terms of my own coaching style, I definitely coached the Nova Scotia senior men's Celtics team differently to how I coach the U18 women's team for the Celtics. And that would be a different style, a different way to intro, and not that it'll always be different, but at the time they're in different places. And I think that the first thing for me when I'm going in is what skills can be collated between both and can benefit both 15s and sevens. And then from a men's and women's point of view, I'll change that a little bit and maybe say it's more masculine and feminine. So there's masculine mindsets and feminine mindset, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're male or female. In terms of myself, I have masculine traits as a coach, developed through the sevens, when I had to be pretty straight about whether someone was being selected or not. I took a very straight edged approach, tried to hide all emotion and just get straight to it, essentially rip the band-aid off. When you're working with athletes in a full-time environment, I think having an EQ, or what would more define as the feminine mindset in terms of like being empathetic, etc. I think that's absolutely crucial with people, men's or women's, that are in a full-time daily training environment, because you have to be able to cater to the people that are in front of you. But in terms of Nova Scotia, we tried to create a real level language. We A lot of our provincial coaches all the way down were provincial players, so we were able to essentially have a Nova Scotia style of play that everyone bought into, and it allowed it to be a real, almost coordinated one team approach, which was really healthy.
All right, that's pretty cool. Um, so playing with the Rugby Nova Scotia, you eventually catch the attention of Rugby Canada and get involved in the coaching setup. So you first got involved with men's age grade teams, and then moved into the women's age grade teams and the academy setup. What did you find were some of the biggest differences between the programs?
I think a huge problem in international rugby at the moment for a country like Canada is the inconsistency for a game.
Yeah.
So, like, and it's like, listen, I think you can blame the NSO for lots of things. And like when I was in the provincial organization, like it's so funny, like high schools might differ with clubs, clubs might differ with the province might differ with the national sporting organization, and the NSO might differ with World Rugby. It's this ever going. There's always someone above you. There's always someone below you. The biggest issue with coaching any of the age grade is the inconsistency past the under 20 men's trophy. There's nothing else that's consistent on a year to year basis, and that's it. And that's one of the hardest things. So when you coach age grade, be it in men's or be it in women's, you you have to invent competition for yourself.
Yeah.
You have to play politics. You have to be this manager. You have to go and try and set up things, and that's really hard because you know, like coaches in an international basis are usually defined by their results.
Mm.
So it's very easy for someone to say, you know what, we're going to go play in Rugby America's North as the under 18 Canada team. Well, is that the appropriate level of competition? I would say right now it's not. But it's the easiest thing for people to say, look, U18 Canada have won Rugby's America's North. And that's not what we need right now. We need challenge. And when I left the U18 men's team, I left that because I was dying. I was a huge fan of the U20 women's program. I thought it was an amazing age, and it's an incredible ability of athlete in Canada. And I did strive. I always wanted to be a head coach of a national team. So I loved the under 18 men's team, and I worked really well there with Sean McDonough, Mike Curran, Jeb Sinclair was there in our last year. I really enjoyed that. There was incredible challenge there. I've probably been challenged more by those guys than I had been in a lot of environments. But I was really interested in this U20 realm, and when I went, there was some great work done to create a Tri Nation series for the 4 year. I was head coach for 4 years, but we competed for two because of COVID. So we got the chance to play at home with the U20 Tri Nation series, and then got to play in England. And that first year had Sophie de Goody as our captain, Courtney Holcamp, Asia Hogan Rochester was on the wing, Abby DeGood was in the second rows, all now senior internationals, and Matt Carson, who's now playing for England. So like the talent, that's naming five out of the starting 15. The talent there at that age group was exceptional, and we lost to England by 7 to 10 points, maybe 8 points. But it was an incredible test match, and those are the things I loved about it. And hopefully now with the U20s playing in that Four Nations last year, hopefully that can be something that can be consistent year after year, because that's what that's what we need. We need competition.
Yeah, the transatlantic quad series that took place in Wales that Canada got a clean sweep of, just to remind all listeners and viewers. But yeah, obviously hoping that can continue into the future. Um, but let's get into like the big role, becoming the head coach of the national senior women's sevens team. Um, because you stepped into the role initially as an interim head coach after Mick Byrne and Kelly Russell had taken the reins for a couple of tournaments. I think Mick Byrne was the head coach for the Olympics, and then Kelly Russell was the head coach for the truncated um, game sevens series rounds that were held in Vancouver and Edmonton. Obviously, when you came in, it was in 20, just after 2021 and everything that had been happening with the um cultural coaching structure with the women's sevens team, as well as the high performance review. So how did it feel to take the reins of such a program at that time?
Yeah, it like I've been reminiscing over the last little while, and I've been watching loads of games, and I watched. Uh, this kind of seems quite egotistical, but I watched the first couple of games that I was in charge for, and it was in Dubai, and the commentator said when my name was first ever said on the World Series was said the fourth head coach in 2 years or something like that, and I remember going, "Holy, like that's a lot." The I probably wouldn't have been the most welcomed or favored name when it came up. I think I think I was convenient in terms that I hadn't been around the program, that I'd been with the women's 15s for a number of years. I'd been with the
Mm.
U20s, so there was a bit of a bit of a familiarity with some of the athletes, but not many. And I had a pretty good rapport with the athletes in 15s, I hope. So I was, and also I was pretty affordable.
Mm.
Like Mick Burns' job before coaching was the skills coach with Australia and New Zealand at two World Cups.
Yeah.
My previous jobs was leading Nova Scotia to Newfoundland. So I understand that our profiles were incredibly different. And I also know that when it went out, I think the Canadian community were not that happy with hearing the two words of head coach, but were maybe semi relieved with hearing the word interim.
Mm.
And but selfishly, when I was offered it, like this was a dream job for me. I never thought saying at the opening part of it, just the word Olympics. Like I never thought I would ever go to the Olympics. I had to learn a lot when we went in, and I certainly got a lot wrong. Like I fully, and results show to that. But I was ecstatic. I loved getting the opportunity, and honestly, I was like a kid at Christmas when I knew it was about to be announced because I was really proud.
Mm.
Um, but I suppose that overshadowed my thoughts that some people mightn't want me in this job. And I probably learned that the harder way because I made a serious faux pas, which I got better at over the years. Was I read all social media when it was announced, which was so
Oh
stupid.
no.
Like, what are you doing? Yeah, yeah, and like it's so funny because
Just so you know, Stu's the one that does all the tweets for us, so it wasn't me.
Yeah,
yeah,
sorry about that, Jack.
yeah, don't worry, Derek. I do my research on you guys as well.
Oh,
But like, and it's so funny because some people, I remember recently people asking me like, and do you remember when they came out against you? And you were in a photo with them the other day. Yeah, they came out against me because maybe I wasn't a great choice. Like I don't have any, like I've no issues with that. Like I was a guy from Halifax. I was an Irish guy, and this program went through a significant amount of turmoil,
Mm.
and so I understood that a lot of people maybe said this guy shouldn't be doing, but and I became very humbled very quickly. The level of athlete, the rugby IQ, the questions that you're being asked at training, and the level of detail that you need to go in, and then going to my first tournament and losing games that wait, Canada shouldn't lose these games. And it was certainly very humbling, but I think being humbled is exactly what you need in your dream job because you'll do anything to try and make it better.
Yeah, interesting how you phrase that. Of you were familiar enough in Rugby Canada that people knew who you were, but separate enough from the women's sevens program to not be burdened with what had been going on. And also, as you explained, like one of the interim head coaches before you, Mick Byrne, had been a skills coach at World Cups compared to being a academy coach and a provincial coach. Yeah, I can understand the hesitation from some in the Canadian rugby community. However, you stuck it out. You proved the doubters wrong, and um, as you mentioned, like the big thing at the end was the Olympics in Paris. Um, so we'll start off by looking into the qualification process because um, the round sevens were the qualifying process for the Canadian men's and women's, and but only for USA men because the USA women had qualified as finishing in, I think it was like one of the top four teams on the World Series. So the path to qualifying was somewhat easier, but obviously you were there. What was the experience of qualifying for Paris 2024 through the round sevens?
Yeah, like I'd say before that, so in our first attempt was qualifying via the series. It was
Yeah.
definitely a target for us, and it should be. I don't think we were ready, but it was certainly a target.
Mm.
And what's so weird when you're in a tournament and you want USA to do well if you don't. Like
Yeah.
there was no time at all where Canada were going into a game going, oh God, I hope USA win because it'll make our Olympic. No, not at all. Like
Mm.
every game we went into, we were trying to win that game for sure. But when we weren't playing, it was so like, and I feel I've got the Canadian passport, so I feel like it's blasphemy saying, but we were supporting US.
Yeah.
And nobody would say it out loud.
Mm.
But you wanted them to do well, and that I as a competitor and as somebody that's working in high performance, I hate that because you
Mm.
want to be able to say that we'll win whatever, or we'll compete and try and beat anyone that's in front of. But at the end of the day, it did make our path dramatically easier. Now, I still do I feel like our preparation going into RAN, we could have beaten US. I do. Like our
Mm.
preparation going into RAN was phenomenal. We had Hong Kong, China, we had Japan, and we had Australia all come to Shawnigan and play in two tournaments. So they flew to Canada, and this was 10 days before we went and played in RAN. So do I feel like that competition would have prepared us to beat USA? 100%.
Mm.
And that's we went into it trying to be at our best rather than trying to beat the teams that ran.
Mm.
And we played well. We
Yeah.
conceded one score, which we conceded one score, and when we got off the field, it was like there was a death in the family. Like it was really disappointing for the players. But when we did qualify and we were in ninth, and in sevens you don't get to play. Not many countries get to play at home. This is our
Mm.
second time in a year we've got to play at home. We had Vancouver and we did so. And I have to say, it was a relief. But it took. We had brought in 25 players, and we only got to pick 12, and all 25 all got a T-shirt, all had a drink with us afterwards. But it definitely felt like the job has started, not the job is done.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. So obviously qualifying, job done. Obviously, you have to then turn focus back to the World Series for uh, the end of 23 and entirety of 24. But let's go to the tournament itself. We'll go to Paris. Um, so because the sevens were so close to the opening ceremony, am I correct in believing that none of the Sevens athletes were involved in the opening ceremony?
Depends on the country.
For Canada.
For Canada, we did not go to the opening ceremony.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So
Now, I want it
uh,
on record that the players made that decision.
yeah.
And may I say, what a fabulous decision it was.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it works out well. It obviously worked out well at the end. Did
Yeah.
you did you watch it at all, or was it just like kind of blocked out and focusing on the town?
So we had a fantastic. We call it our cabinet, which is our leadership group. And it was I call it a cabinet because, like in government, it should rotate and there should be
Mm.
reshuffles. And we went in with our cabinet, which was Chloe Daniels, Olivia Apps, Caroline Crosley, and Leisha Corrigan, and they were given, not just them, but we gave them the decision. One of my mentors, Mel Davison, who has coached Canada to multiple Olympics and for the women's hockey team, she said, "Listen, don't make this decision for them." She was fabulous with advice for me. To give it to them. They'll come up with the right decision, and whatever decision they do, back it. And
Mm.
I love that. So I gave them the choice. And originally they said, no, we want to go to the opening ceremony. And a lot of coaches, we would discuss it as coaches. Are you guys going? Are you guys going? And it became like this kind of inter-country link. And some countries had to go, because their Summer Olympic party was so small. But
Mm.
some were, a lot of them were given the choice. So our athletes kind of said, like, yes, originally, and then they came back and said, actually, we don't. Could we invite our friends and family to Canada House, which is outside the village, to watch it? And we'll get into our opening ceremony outfits. So we went and did the opening ceremony launch with all of Team Canada and the flag bearers. And then we got into cars and went to Canada House and watched it with the Team Canada community and friends and family. And it was a really nice night, and it took 3 hours as opposed to 8.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That obviously makes a lot of sense. Because of the way that the Olympics was set up and run, is that the men's sevens began on the Wednesday, and then on the Saturday it concluded, and then women's rugby took the spotlight from the Sunday. But we noticed on social media that one of the New Zealand players was a huge fan of Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce and saw her in the athletes' village. And then Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce came to watch on one of the days of the sevens. But did you see any positive fan interactions with any of the Canadian athletes or any of the other sevens athletes?
Yeah, I think, first of all, the timing of sevens, like you said, Stuart, it was perfect because we're in France, which is rugby mad. Antoine Dupont is playing. Both men's and women's French teams were medal contenders, so we ended up a lot of the team and the coaches went to watch the men's quarterfinal night, and Argentina run out to play against France, and the booze, but it was one of the greatest atmospheres we'd ever been at, and like goosebumps even thinking about it, talking about it, and we're sitting there going, holy God, this is special. And when we met the players the next day, we're now going into our kind of captain's run type timing, and we had already mapped out how we win a medal, and one of those things was a big night against France in the quarterfinal, and players having gone to watch the men's French team was perfect because everybody was now like frothing at the mouth. We could play France. We could be the villains, and we could, and our whole theme going into it was spoiling the party. And because rugby again was behind a lot, was before a lot of sports. Team Canada, who were all there, who were ready to compete, just got behind the rugby because we were also on the latest of all the events. So people were staying up to watch us. So when you get into the village, people are just like, great job, like that was awesome. And also they don't know anything about rugby sevens. So then they're going, when's your quarterfinal? When's your semi-final? Next week? Like, no, in about 12 hours. Like that's where we were at. But it was certainly something that we felt all of Team Canada getting behind. The Canadian ambassador was there, the chef de mission was there. So like a lot of Team Canada used it to the betterment, which was amazing.
So you did kind of touch on it a little bit. Obviously, going through the tournament, Canada's doing really well, and eventually you did get to that game where you got to play France, be the villains, spoil the party. No double gold for the French. But what was that like? What was that moment of kind of seeing that crazy French atmosphere, and then like watching it kind of slowly get quieter and quieter as the game went on?
I think it didn't feel quieter. It just felt more on edge, which I think created more on edge for us. Like we had played them so much, even 8 days before the Olympics, we went down to their home base and played them twice. People don't know this. Like we made a deal with them. We wanted to play full contact. Not a lot of other teams wanted to play full contact, but I didn't want to go in with the regret that we weren't battle ready.
Yeah.
Like that was a huge theme for all of us. Like us as coaches, we wanted to make sure that the body shouldn't be 100%. You should just feel battle ready. And that took a bit convincing to the athletes, but our S&C did a great job, our physio did a great job, and our coach did a good job in almost showing why this is the path to success. You warm up outside the stadium, and Stade de France is one of the greatest stadiums in the world. Even when I saw France men's play New Zealand men's last Friday night or whatever it was, you just see the haka and you see the blue, white, and red, and you're just like, oh my god, this atmosphere is amazing. And it was like we were warming up outside, and it was deafening outside the stadium. And you're warming up in this small, tiny little patch of grass that nobody can see, and then you go into the tunnel, and coaches have to walk out at a different entrance, and you walk out early. So I walked out. I couldn't get radio to Ian Monaghan, who was up above, or Jocelyn Barrio, who was right beside me. We couldn't hear each other because it was so loud. And when Canada ran out, there was incredible smiles on the faces, and they were exactly where they needed to be. But I did think in that second, I looked up at the big screen, and there was laughing, there was smiles, there was hugs, there was high fives. And I remember thinking and turning to Jen Joyce, who's our head of S&C. I just said, that'll either be they were so relaxed, that's why they won. They were far too relaxed, that's why they lost. All I could think about before the game, and I don't know why, but your head just goes there. And when France ran out, it was deafening. Like it was incredible. It was the greatest moment in sport that I've ever been involved in. And I say that it's going to be the greatest moment I'll ever be involved in, or multiple people be involved in. You're in a sold out Stade de France in the quarterfinals of the Olympics playing against the home team. Like you can't really write that. And came down to the last play where I thought we got a clean poach by Fancy. She also thought that too. But now we're playing on, and we've a load of the bench on. Carissa puts in a big hit. Asia puts in a massive hit, and then they pass it forward, and hasn't blown the whistle. So all of us are on the sideline going, "Are you going to call it? Are you going to call it?" And then when the whistle went, nobody cheered because it needed the confirmation of the final whistle to say that this game is over, and finally. And it's not just that you've won a quarterfinal, you're guaranteed to be playing for an Olympic medal. And that's probably the feeling that I want to go back to, and I go back watching the game to sleep at night if I need to. But it's still, even saying it out there, like I'm still getting kind of hairs up on my arms for sure.
Well, speaking of going for a medal, the next game was up against Australia in the semi-finals. This is a team that finished second in the World Series overall, ahead of France, who finished third. Um, and I remember watching this game. I remember Charity Williams taking that ball and scoring on like the stroke of half time. And then in the second half, Canada were able to take the lead. And when the final whistle goes, it means that Canada are going for the gold medal. And I didn't realize, I mean, I realized they were going for a medal at the time, but I didn't realize that that meant that this would be the most successful women's sevens team that Canada have produced for the Olympics. I say that there's only been 3 women's sevens tournaments in the Olympics so far. So yeah, but how
I,
how
I
did it
think,
how did it feel when that final whistle went for that game, knowing that silver was guaranteed?
yeah, like I think first of all, we knew we weren't favorites, right? And
Mm,
once we got, like, I was so worried about playing China. China are a brilliant team.
yeah.
And when we did beat China, we're into the quarters, and it was like, okay, we're top 8, we're into the quarters, and things were starting to go piece by piece. Uh, Going into Australia, we wanted to take a shot. We wanted to almost theme it like we're in a bar fight. We felt like if we could close them down aggressively, that, like, sometimes when you're playing against such a fast team, you might play a bit passive. But we couldn't play passive, and we cert I yeah, that was all me saying we should go 12-0 down. That was genius by me. Like we certainly weren't feeling great after those opening minutes. Charity was playing on one leg. Charity had to warm up on her own for the majority of the Olympics. So did Kiara. She certainly wasn't 100%. So when Maddie Levi went around her, like, this was Charity not at her best, and to stop Maddie Levi, you got to be at your best. But Charity knew that I was always going to take her off. We'd been minding her as much as possible, and honestly, to have that trust with the athletes, would Charity have gone for that if she felt she had to play 14 minutes? I don't know, but she knew that she could do a burst. It's the last play of the first half. And those moments, because in the second half, we played incredibly collective and we controlled the game. Like, for
Mm.
the entirety of the second half, the possession stats are wild. But it took the moment from Charity. And I think when you look back to all the games, it's a team collective win or result for sure, but there was moments that we needed from players, and that in that semi-final we needed that moment from Charity. And when the final whistle went, um it was surreal. Like, a lot of people said, oh, could you believe it? Of course I could believe it. We had been saying every single day in snowy Langford, raining Langford, sunny Langford, that our goal here wasn't to get to the Olympics, it was to be Olympic champions. We would say it, or it's to get on a podium. We said that every single day. So when people say, like, you mustn't have, or you must have thought, wow, that was amazing, it was never planned. Like, you have to go in with a plan to be the best, because if you fall 1 or 2 short, you're still right up there. If you'd aimed just to get to the bronze game, you fall earlier.
Yeah.
Like, it's like when you're kicking, you're telling somebody not to aim between the posts, aim at a particular dot, because if you miss, it's still over the post. So for us, we were striving to be the best in the world. So when the final whistle went, I just think what happened was everybody looked around each other and just felt like it was worth it. Like,
Mm.
because the sacrifices that the players and staff made was unbelievable. And it was, again, to get that ecstasy feeling twice in 2 days, I feel really selfish because you don't get them in sport. You certainly don't get a lot of them in sevens. Like a quick win is usually finished by a quick loss, or a quick loss to a quick win. But it just meant that we could go into a gold medal game, secure the best ever finish. We've now showed that the Canadian women's sevens team are multi-Olympic medal winners, not a silver medal winner. They're multi medal winners because like Australia, New Zealand are the only other team that have won multi medals. So we're second on the all-time women's sevens chart. That's really special for the country and not just for our team. And again, going into that final, we said, if we win silver or win gold, make sure we win it. Don't just accept silver. Like, take a punch. Make sure that if this New Zealand team, which is good and had beaten us 2 days earlier by 30 points, if they beat us, that they've literally ripped it off our necks. And that will make us proud forever. And in my mind, we did that. We took a shot. Don't get me wrong, I'm not happy with losing. I can tell you the moments in the game that defined that we didn't win the game, but we were up for that game, and we didn't play particularly well in the first half for like six minutes, and then suddenly we clicked it, and we just couldn't put that 10 minutes together like we did in all the other games. But we were playing against a ferocious opposition, and at the final whistle, we were devastated. But when we got up into that podium, I think we were able to just go, hey, a year ago we were ninth. So getting an Olympic silver medal, we'll take that.
Yeah. When we had Karen Paquin on a couple of years ago, and Derek asked the question of like, how do you handle a loss to then go into the bronze medal match? And she was basically like, you just got to pull yourself together. There's obviously less pulling yourself together if after a loss you get onto the second step of the podium and you get a nice piece of silverware around your neck. But
like, imagine going in with the thought that where you've already won an Olympic medal. Like it is, and we didn't have long after the semi-final, so there's not really sit down there where celebrate. You have to kind of focus for the next game, and we had prepared for whatever we had to be at, and we talked about all the time. We'd lost in the Vancouver semi-final, and we said, listen, if this is the Olympics, do you want to come forth, or do you want to win a medal and be on the podium? So we spoke about that a lot. But to go into a game having already won an Olympic medal is surreal. It's crazy.
Yeah, that was actually it was something I was kind of going to ask, because obviously rugby, and I guess a lot of team sports in general, when it comes to the Olympics, it is kind of interesting because when you get to that gold medal match, like the silver medal teams, as amazing as their tournaments were, you do have to lose your last game. So which is kind of different from if you ran 100-meter dash and got silver, it's you finish second in the last race or whatever. But can you describe kind of like you said, maybe the emotions of when the final whistle goes in, you did lose, but you also won an Olympic silver medal at the same time. It's the best performance Canada's ever had. It's a freaking medal at the Olympics. It's tough to get much cooler than that. But at the same time, you there maybe some, I don't know, I guess conflicting. I'm not really sure. I'm kind of very curious about how that emotional roller coaster, I guess, kind of plays out for athletes and coaches.
After the semi-final, we walked in, and our year was, again, we were ninth. The previous, the last World Series event, our final ranking was not. We came 10th in that competition in Toulouse, and then we were overall ninth. So the bookies' odds on us getting an Olympic medal were outrageous. The only people who believed it was us, and I don't think all of us did. I think it took a long time. So we then said, right, this is our checklist this year. If we're going to get an Olympic medal, we have to top our pool at one tournament. We did that in Hong Kong. we had to beat France, GB, and New Zealand in the regular season if we were very serious. So we did that in Vancouver, in LA, and in Madrid. And Australia was Vancouver. And we wanted to get on one podium. We wanted to reach 3 semi-finals. So these are all the things that we said along the way. We needed this checklist to be pulled off. The one that we hadn't had was, one of our targets was, we want to sing the anthem. We sang it at RAN, and we hadn't sang it again. And we said, like, if we get to sing the anthem this year, that shows that we're in the right path to win an Olympic medal. So the first time that we qualified for a final was the Olympic final. And after the semi-final, it's ecstasy. You go into there's a press room, so you're doing press, and then afterwards you're going into the locker room. And I walk in, and the team are in a circle, and they're practicing the anthem. And I was just like, and I remember one of those moments. Nowadays, we all whip out our phones. I didn't. I just stood there in awe. And I was like trying to grab staff members to show them that this is the most magical moment I've ever been involved in sport. Right. Because this was the thing that we were chasing. And whether you identify with the anthem, whether you have a love for it, whether you have gone, like, the anthem and people singing the anthem has gone through ups and downs over the last number of years. And I'm not talking about anything to do with a political stand. What I'm talking about is our team had said, if we get to hear the anthem, we are on the right page, or we're on the right path to an Olympic medal. And then they started laughing because we got to the French bit, and people are like, oh, I don't know it. What is it? And there starts to be that bit of banter about it. But when the team runs out to sing the anthem, and they walked out determined, actually, there's no high fives and giggling. Everyone walked out pretty determined. The staff were arm in arm opposite the players, and we sang the anthem together. And Chrissy Skerfield's jersey was being held up because she, of course, was in hospital. And that was the moment that I just said, we've done it. We've done it. And I wasn't giving up on the final, don't get me wrong. But I wasn't. It was my last tournament. I didn't want to not enjoy this moment either. And the emotion, I was certainly overwhelmed. Like, the emotion was a lot. And at the end, at the final whistle, we didn't have the ecstasy of sprinting around, jumping into each other's arms, winning, but we certainly were able to go over to each other and think, job well done. And people often ask me, would you have preferred to win a bronze medal in the bronze medal game or lose and win silver? It is zero debate. We came out of that tournament with an Olympic silver medal. And we as a group and as a country should be pretty proud of it.
All right. Well, as you mentioned, that was your final tournament as the head coach of the women's national senior sevens team. And you're currently in, I don't want to say limbo, but you've ended your tenure as the head coach, and your new position as the head coach of the Ottawa Gee Gees women's team will begin from January 1st, 2025. So we all saw that press release come out. I think it came out before the Olympics as well. So it was the confirmation.
April,
yeah, confirmation that you would not be continuing, and they were in the process of hiring a new head coach. But it also said that you would be coaching the Ottawa Gee Gees. So in the similar way to how did the provincial job with Rugby Nova Scotia come about, how did this job come about for you?
Yeah, as I said, it was my dream job, the women's sevens team. So deciding to leave was really hard. And even now, like, watching everything and not being involved, it's weird. Like, it's limbo, as you just said. I think from my end, we were on the right page in Vancouver. We had then gone to LA, and we had we gone semi-final and semi-final. So in my mind, I'm like, we're on the right path here. Like, and the feeling of training with the athletes and the staff was really clicking. It was awesome, but it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. We've made a lot of staffing changes. We've made a lot of athlete changes. You're giving 12 to 14 players their dream to pick them for the Olympics, but you're also telling 12 people that their dream is over. It's really hard. And I had moved over to Victoria from my home base in Halifax with all my mates, and I put everything into it. I'm not the best from an administrative point of view anyway, so it takes me longer to do things. So my days are a bit longer than probably the average person. And I didn't know whether I could keep the room. It's hard to keep the room in professional sport, high performance sport, and that's not saying anything about the players, but it is tough to keep the room if I'd have stayed on, or if I offered to continue. Keeping a room for 7.5 years is pretty tough going. It's a long time. And I made the decision that if I wasn't looking for anything else, but I saw this job come up, I was always incredibly interested in the university realm. I like U Sport. I think it's a fantastic system that we're a part of. And I had people working in the university that said, like, listen, I don't know if you're up for a change, but this would be an incredible lifestyle for you, in terms of like not traveling around every week, having a home base, maybe even buying a house. Like, I don't want to throw ideas out there, but like it certainly became a lifestyle choice, while also working with a university that takes their athletes, or sorry, takes their athletics really, really seriously, and prioritizes their student athletes. So it was probably one of the hardest decisions that I ever had to make in my life. But the university went above and beyond to try and get me there. Like starting in January was not the choice of the university. That was my personal choice. I felt I needed a break, and I wanted to help the transition go to the new head coach. So again, the hardest thing I ever had to do, but like, it's not easy. I don't want, when you're not doing well and people are saying you're not doing well and they're not coached well, and you can ignore it all you want, but it's really hard when you put yourself out there. Your dream job might be someone else's dream job who will cut you by the knees. Your dream job might be someone else's very passionate hobby, and when their hobby isn't going well, when their team that they support and get up early in the morning to look at isn't going well, they're upset. All of the and when you can't please the athletes and I don't and the staff all the time, like, our lifestyle in the build up to the Olympics was nearly impossible. I knew every time he said to the staff, it was like, it's just for this year. It won't be like this all the time, but like, let's just sacrifice everything for this year. And I think I got a lot of stuff right, but some of the stuff I got wrong was managing the staff and their work life balance. I should have prioritized that, not just presumed everybody had a similar mindset to me, in terms of like, I'll do emails on a Sunday night because it makes me feel better. Well, other people's, their Sunday night is the one time that they don't want anything work. So like, I got that wrong. I think I improved, but I certainly got it wrong. And also, in high performance sport, I think you leave too early or you leave too late. I don't think there's a mid range. And I wanted to leave too early when I was proud. I think genuinely, if we didn't do well in LA or Vancouver, I would have left. The job wasn't done, but I felt like we were in a really, really healthy place, and this was a very positive time for me to leave.
Yeah, that's a great way of thinking of it. Derek, people who are passionate about a hobby and then when the scores don't well, they complain about it. Have you ever heard such nonsense in your life?
Oh, like I said to Jack earlier, you're the one that does all the tweets and stuff. It's not me. It's not me. I'm clean, man.
Hey,
I've
you sent me the
But
draft.
but also, what's like, even though I've been in that place, and like, lads, it got dark at times. Like, I was getting calls and texts, and like, and you turn off your social media, and then one of your mates will screenshot it, send it to you, and go, "Did you see what someone said about you?"
Oh,
And you're like, "Cheers, lads, thanks." But it's so awful because then I'll go and be a fan and watch my favorite soccer team or rugby team, and I'll think exactly the same thing and have zero empathy, which I think is like absolutely mind boggling. But I don't blame people about being passionate. I think it, like, lads, if we stop tweeting and if we stop putting things on social media, it means we've stopped caring, and that is so much worse than
yeah,
trying to change
absolutely.
someone's mind. And I know that we've a lot of work to do in Canadian rugby. And from my end, when I go to the University of Ottawa, I'm not just going to the University of Ottawa. I'm going to Eastern Ontario. I'm going to the local community to hopefully referee and help, because I still want to be part of the solution, like, genuinely. And I'm not trying to say, I think there's a few things that were a bit corny, but like, I love rugby, and we opened this up by explaining what I did in the local town. But my hobby and my career is rugby. So hopefully to change, and in particular the men's game and the women's game developing. I want to be hopefully hands dirty in the weeds doing what I did in Nova Scotia.
All right. Great thing. Um, so obviously your coaching career is still ongoing. It's just going in, you're moving now from national sevens to university 15s. Um, and obviously having an Olympic medal is a great thing to have. Finishing third at the Vancouver Sevens is another like monument. But from your personal perspective, how do you measure success in your coaching career?
Like, it's a big question. It's certainly not through accolades. I think from a high performance perspective, results matter. And I think, honestly, peaking at the right time with the women's sevens was exceptional. And there's a lot of stuff that went down to it. And I got to be one of the players at the table, and I'm forever grateful for that. In terms of going to the University of Ottawa, there's two deliverables that I have. Yeah, like, I think the university would love a national championship for sure, and I'm never not going to be competitive. But from my end, if the student athletes leave with a degree and leave still enjoying the game of rugby and wanting to be part of the game of rugby, that is defined as success.
Mm,
Like, it has to be, because we're not big enough in Canada for people to not like the sport. We're not
mm,
big enough to be a varsity athlete for 4 years and then hate the game of rugby forever. Those varsity athletes need to be our next international rugby players. They also
mhm,
need to be our next coaches, our next referees, and our next treasurers. Like, all of those things are vital for the game of rugby. So in my mind, it's my job to make sure that people don't leave hating the game of rugby. And that's going to be difficult, because varsity it feels professional. Like, the setup I'm going into is exceptional. And you look at a lot of the varsity programs across the country, and they've full-time coaches and full-time admin staff, and it is exceptional. But from my perspective, my philosophy changes from time to time, and success will change with team to team. And like, selfishly, I hope I'm not doing international coaching internationally. I hope at some stage I'll get to go back. I
mm.
don't know where, I don't know when, I don't know what code, but I'm leaving at a time that hopefully the sevens would welcome me back in 10 years' time, or as long as I stay relevant and up to date. And I'm not saying that I want to go back, but I don't feel I've slammed the door there with Rugby
Mm.
Canada or with with the sevens, which I think is great. But the success is completely different when it comes to team.
All right. And obviously you're mentioning referees and treasurers and coaches. I guess one of the way we're going to end this is if anyone wants to now get into coaching in Canada, what would be your major recommendations?
Yeah, I think first of all, then go in to coaching and say, I'm new to this. Or players starting the game of rugby often say like, oh, I've never really played. Don't belittle yourself like that. Like everyone is coming from somewhere. Chrissy Skirfield came from gymnastics and hockey. Piper came from gymnastics. Charity came from track. Like, yes, you might be new to the game of rugby, but you've still got an X factor that you built somewhere else. In terms of coaching, I believe it's exactly the same. Teachers that come into coaching, you've already learned how to teach everything. You're already better than most of us because you know how to teach somebody something. Business people might be good with Excel. Like you could have volunteered somewhere else, so your organizational effectiveness might be really, really good. I think one of the biggest things with coaches coming in is embrace what you're already good at, because you come in and when you're coaching, and I had this with the women's sevens, you're vulnerable. I had this with DCU when I was really young coaching the team. You're vulnerable because you feel like you're not worthy of these positions. Take your X factors that you already have. For me, I did drama when I was a kid. Like that's not something that goes hand in hand with rugby, but it made me pretty confident to public speak. So that although I mightn't have had the greatest knowledge, I can public speak in front of a group. Little did I know that that's actually an incredible thing to have when you go in to coach a team. So everyone has the X factor to get in. And the next thing you said earlier, Stu, you said that you were kind of seen before you went into age grade. Well, actually, I wasn't. I was just very eager and willing. So I said, hey, can I come to this camp? I'll pay my own way. I got funding. And in Canada, there is an incredible openness to people to come in and watch, guest coach, learn from, challenge, and we just don't do it enough. So when people say like I don't know who I'm learning from, go out there and learn. Like I've learned a lot from Troy Ryan, who coaches the women's hockey team. Cindy Ty is another Nova Scotia soccer coach who actually has just been appointed as the interim head coach for the senior women's national team. She was my mentor for years. Like those things are invaluable. So you mightn't be able to get it somewhere, but go out and learn styles of coaching, review processes, and then just be willing to go into different environments and learn, because it's massive. And I think sometimes we look at the have-nots rather than the haves. And in Canada, in sport, we have tons of haves. So we just got to get out there and use them.
All right. That is fantastic. And I think that is an appropriate way to end this episode. Jack, thank you so much for joining us and offering your insight. And to any one of our listeners or watchers, if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out more as well as our written pieces on our website, therougerugby.ca. You'll find our podcast is also on Spotify, S4P, and Apple Podcasts. We have our YouTube channel at The Rouge Rugby. Make sure to like and subscribe and hit the bell notification to stay up to date with all our videos. We're also available across social media, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and Blue Sky, all at The Rouge Rugby. Now, Jack, you said you've deleted your social media profile, so I won't ask you. But Derek, where can people find you on social media?
At Percept the Jet across all social media networks, except maybe the 35 new ones that have showed up in the past 3 weeks, but maybe not.
Yeah,
Now I haven't deleted Stu. I just didn't read anything that I was posted about. I'm still there. I'm just bad at it.
Okay, so where can people find you on social media? On your Instagram?
Like really, really tough at Jack Hanratty. went really bougie there. Yeah, no, I'm on Twitter and Instagram, and maybe I'll get better over the next few years.
All right. And you can find me across social media at Hardman, spelled H4RDMAN. Well, that's where we're going to end this episode. Jack, again, thank you so much for joining us. Derek, thank you for joining me. And thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast, where we talk about real Canadian rugby. We hope you can join us again next time.